I am not, nor have I ever been, obsessed with John Wayne. Hello and welcome back to Bookish, and welcome to a video that I just thought would be fun to do, and that is to name my top 10 westerns, movies that I've ever seen, liked, loved. This is a thing going along as a part of June on the Range, which is a June reading event, which I'm honestly not taking part in, but I'm just going to glom onto the movie part. I saw that, I believe Randy Ray did this video, and I saw that MJ and Gareth did a video where they discussed their favorites back and forth, and so I thought I wanted to get in on this because there was a time in my life when I was really obsessed with watching westerns, and it kind of carried over for a long time. So these are not necessarily in order, 10 to 1, even though the last one I'll talk is in fact my favorite, and I've kind of we'll probably discuss them a little bit in order, but not strictly speaking. I haven't numbered them, is what I'm trying to say. So enough of that, let's get on with it, and I will talk about my top 10 favorite westerns. At number 10, I have Once Upon a Time in the West. This is the only one of the spaghetti westerns made by Sergio Leone that will be on my list. This is one that does not star Clint Eastwood. Instead, it stars Charles Bronson as a character who plays the harmonica. He plays a really distinctive piece on the harmonica, and I believe his name in the movie, or he's just referred to as Harmonica. It has Jack Elam is in it, and then most kind of surprisingly, Henry Fonda is in it playing a bad guy. The plot is really complicated and convoluted, and it has to do with trains and watering stations and property ownership, but there are just a lot of really great gunfights and scenes in the movie. The opening gunfight, Charles Bronson takes on 3 men, and I think the outcome there is probably pretty obvious. There's a gunfight that takes place after one of the people who's against the bad guy gives him a shave, which is really memorable, and Henry Fonda's in that. So I just really liked the movie. I thought it was really kind of great and atmospheric, and it's my favorite spaghetti westerns. The next movie on my list I'm going to say is Five Card Stud. I mentioned this in the comments of some other people's videos on this. Five Card Stud is a movie starring Dean Martin and Robert Mitchum. Roddy McDowall is in it. Well, there's somebody else in it who I'm forgetting right now, but there are a lot of stars from the 60s, I believe, in this movie, and it involves someone who comes to this small town. I believe the name of the town is Rincon. Comes to this small town seeking revenge for their brother being hanged after he was caught cheating in a card game. And as it goes on, slowly somebody is taking revenge on the people who were at that card game, slowly eliminating them one by one until Dean Martin kind of figures out who that is. It's really, really dark, and I think that's one of the things you're going to find that I kind of like in my westerns, is that it's really a pretty dark movie. And there's some really kind of gruesome ways in which people get killed. The next one on my list, I'm going to list El Dorado. El Dorado is a John Wayne movie. It's a Howard Hawks directed John Wayne movie, and it is the remake, really, of a movie that's on a lot of people's lists, and that is Rio Bravo. So Rio Bravo stars John Wayne, Dean Martin, Ricky Nelson, Angie Dickinson. Apparently Howard Hawks was unhappy with something about that movie, and so he remade it with John Wayne, Robert Mitchum, and then James Caan were the 3 main characters. It's essentially the same plot. Some kind of evil rich guy in town is doing up to bad stuff. The sheriff, in this case, is Robert Mitchum, and he's a drunk, a recovering alcoholic, and there are gun battles, and good guys come in, and all kinds of things like that happen. I just kind of prefer El Dorado, primarily because I prefer James Caan to Ricky Nelson, and I always found that the relationship between Angie Dickinson and John Wayne just seemed really, really odd. So I prefer El Dorado for that reason. I don't believe John Wayne has a love interest in El Dorado. Let's see. The next one on my list I'm going to say is Cheyenne Autumn. Cheyenne Autumn was directed by the often Academy Award winning John Ford. This is a movie which really was supposed to kind of go against type in the way in which Native Americans were depicted. It tells the story of a group of Cheyenne people who escape from a reservation and attempt to get back to their homeland, and the struggles they have and the efforts of the United States military to force them back onto the reservation. It's supposed to present the Indigenous Americans in a sympathetic light, And it really does that. And I remember as a kid when I watched it that I really, clearly your sympathy, your feelings are that these are people who've been massively mistreated, and that they're right. And yet, in the end, we know what's going to happen. Sadly, and this is true for the depiction of almost all Native Americans in movies, sadly, despite the idea that it was going to kind of be an improvement of the way in which Indigenous Americans were presented in movies, they chose not to have any Indigenous American star in the leading roles of the Indigenous Americans in the movie, which really is a black mark. Richard Widmark is probably the big star in the movie, and it's just one of those movies that I watched over and over again as a kid, and it had a real impact on me. Let's see, I'm not sure where I am on my list, but the next movie on my list I'm going to say is The Searchers, another John Ford movie starring John Wayne, and it's incredibly grim. This is an incredibly dark movie about revenge and killing and racism, and it's just incredibly grim. And at the same time, it is one of the most beautifully shot westerns I think ever. John Ford was a genius for setting up shots oftentimes, and despite the fact that the place where a lot of the action in the movie takes place would not have been where the action took place with those Indigenous Americans that John Wayne finds himself going up against, it is beautiful, and it shows off the American West in a really powerful way. Let's see, next on my list I'm going to put, I'm going to put the Lonesome Dove miniseries next to my list. Is one of my favorite westerns. So this was like an event in the 1980s. Lonesome Dove, I believe, was published sometime in the mid-80s. The Lonesome Dove TV miniseries came out a couple years later. And I remember that one winter when I was in college, a friend of mine and I were kind of snowed in, believe it or not, in Nacogdoches, Texas. That was true over a Christmas holiday. And there was no cable television, and we just kind of watched the Lonesome Dove miniseries, which he had on VHS tapes over and over again. If you haven't seen it and you like the book Lonesome Dove, you really should see this miniseries. It has some great actors in it and great performances. Robert Duvall, Tommy Lee Jones, Angelica Houston, just to name three people whose performances are truly extraordinary. Diane Lane is in the movie. Just really great performances, and it's fairly true to the book, and so I really loved it. Really, the scene where Tommy Lee Jones beats up the cavalry colonel because he's hit Newt trying to steal his horse is just powerful. The scene where we find out what happens to Augustus is incredibly powerful. Just a lot of really great performances. A little bit of it is 80s cheesy, but I really liked it. Let's see, next on my list I have True Grit, and I'm going to go with the 2010 version of True Grit. That would be the one starring Haley Steinfeld and Jeff Bridges is as Rooster Cogburn, and Matt Damon is the Texas Ranger, LaBeef, and they are great performances. I really like the John Wayne version of this movie as well, and I think the performances in that are equally great. The reason why I chose the 2010 version is I think it gives you a much more realistic picture of how dirty and gritty and weird the world in which the events take place. Particularly, I'm thinking about the scene where Rooster and Maddie find a man hanging from a very high tree, and then this whole discussion about the value of a human body, and there are extra scenes in the 2010 which I think make it a better movie, and so that's why I picked it. This is the number 2 on my list. I know that I'm pretty sure that's where I am. Really should have numbered these. Oh no, this would be number 3 on my list. I have Unforgiven, the Clint Eastwood. I think just masterpiece. I'm not a fan of Clint Eastwood, the human being, but in terms of making a great Western, I think this is one. And again, this is incredibly dark, about an old gunfighter, rabble-rouser, criminal named, whose name's William Money, who has fell in love and left behind drinking and violence and all those things to become a farmer and raise his kids. His wife dies, he's struggling, and one of his old kind of running buddies comes back, and they have a job to do, to go and kill these people who attacked a prostitute in this small town. And so they set out to do that. And I think it has a lot to say. The movie has a lot to say about violence, and particularly how we look at violence in movies. Great performances here. Morgan Freeman is great. Gene Hackman as Little Bill, the sheriff of this town, is absolutely great. Richard Harris has kind of a small role as an aging gunfighter called the Duke in this movie, and just really great performances, and an end scene, gunfight scene, which is just chilling and really well done. So, Unforgiven also would be on my list. So then, this is clearly, I think, pretty sure, this is the my second favorite Western, and that would be The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. Again, another John Ford movie. This one stars John Wayne and Jimmy Stewart, with the love interest being Vera Miles. And I forgot to mention Woody Strode. I should mention Woody Strode here. Woody Strode was really one of the first black actors, I think, to find his way into lots of movies where you usually did not find black actors. And even though in The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, he clearly plays John Wayne's servant, and he at one point saves John Wayne. Woody Strode, by the way, you can find also, he's in Once Upon a Time in the West, and you can also find him in Spartacus, in one of the gladiator scenes with Kirk Douglas. Anyway, so The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance is just kind of a classic. Greenhorn comes to rough western town, runs afoul of the criminal element there. John Wayne is this other tough guy who's the only guy tough enough to face down the bad guy. The bad guy calls out Jimmy Stewart. Events ensue that have repercussions in all their lives. And again, there's a real dark edge to this, in the sense of the choice that the Vera Miles character makes between the Jimmy Stewart character and the John Wayne character, and the implications that has. Just really well done. And it was my dad's favorite Western. So my all-time favorite Western, you probably might be able to guess it by now, is Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Robert Redford, Paul Newman, Catherine Ross are really the only three people in the movie who you think about. I mean, there are other characters in it, of course. Just a really great buddy movie in that kind of 1970s style. I believe Randy pointed out that the soundtrack doesn't seem to, is an atypical Western soundtrack. I think that's absolutely true. It's funny, it's entertaining. It also has a lot of elements of violence. The criminal activities that Butch and Sundance get up to don't always work out very well. Catherine Ross's character is kind of in a position kind of torn between them. She's with Robert Redford, who's a Sundance Kid. But clearly she has affection for Paul Newman, who feels the same. It's just a really great movie, I think, and the ending is one of the all-time great movie endings. There's also a really great kind of cameo by Strother Martin in the movie. Anyway, there you go. There's my top 10 favorite Western movies of all time. Look forward to your comments in the comment section below. And as always, thank you for watching.